clergy sex abuse crisis.
Ma misure concrete ed efficaci.
The Vatican opens its 4-day global summit on preventing misconduct with strong words from Pope Francis and an apology to victims. We have reports and reaction from Rome. Reforming seminaries. We talk to a woman who wants to change how priests are trained. And my exclusive interview. The son of a Catholic priest tells us his fight for the church to recognize him and other children of clergy. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, February 21st, 2019.
Ci mettiamo in ascolto dello Spirito Santo.
Invoking the guidance of the Holy Spirit, Pope Francis opens a landmark sex abuse summit on abuse, calling for concrete action. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Pope Francis opened a high-stakes 4-day clergy sex abuse summit by demanding action from bishops. He gave them a list of 21 reflection points to consider and discuss. He made it clear he expected concrete and effective measures. Bishops listened to recordings of 5 victims of clergy sexual abuse from 5 continents as they described their suffering.
Ci vuole concretezza.
And the Holy Father pleaded with 190 participants from bishops' conferences and religious orders around the world to listen to the cry of victims and to turn an evil into a chance for purification and understanding. Alan Holdren is our EWTN Rome Bureau Chief. Alan, what tone did the Pope's message this morning set for this summit?
Well, Lauren, he followed up those words imploring the bishops to concrete action with something very concrete, reflection points. He gave them 21 points to discuss and reflect upon during these discussions, including very practical things like making a handbook for how to deal with key moments in the investigation of accusations of abuse. Also, the establishment of provisions to include lay experts in investigations. These are things that we've heard about repeatedly, people calling for them over the last year. We also heard from people who participated inside the meeting hall who said that the atmosphere was one of intensity. The bishops really looking to get their hands into this and talk about it and come to concrete proposals for change. And also we heard from 2 of the organizing committee members who spoke about how the bishops really need to take ownership. They use that word ownership of these situations, of these problems, and also take responsibility for the healing of victims.
Is there any word on whether or not at the end of this meeting there will be concrete action taken?
Well, that's the hope. What they said today is that following up on those 21 reflection points, they won't be able to discuss all of them throughout these just 3 days and a half of meetings. So what there will have to be afterwards is a continuation, ongoing discussions about what to do. That's why on the tail end of these 3.5 days of meetings, next Monday there's going to be a meeting between all of the different heads of the dicasteries, the different departments of the Holy See, and the organizing committee members will be present to speak about where to go from here.
Are you talking to the presidents of the bishops' conferences who are there from all over the world? And if so, what are they saying?
Well, there were a couple of bishops there present at a briefing that was organized by the committee for this meeting on the protection of minors. Archbishop Scicluna, who we continue to talk about as he's a part of the organizational committee as well, and also Archbishop Mark Coleridge of Brisbane in Australia. They were speaking about the real importance of getting together, coming together, and talking about these issues to come up with those concrete proposals for change. They said that this morning, a very important moment was when they heard 5 testimonies from victims. They just heard audio. The victims were anonymous, and they could hear the voices of these people describing the situations that they had lived, and they each said that that was a very powerful experience and that you can't walk away from that not being changed.
We heard from 4 victims yesterday here on News Nightly. We'll hear from some others in the coming days. Thank you so much. Alan Holdren, our EWTN Rome Bureau Chief.
Thank you, Lauren.
You can read the Pope's 21 discussion points right now on our News Nightly Facebook and Twitter pages. Meanwhile, as Alan mentioned, the participants heard testimony from clergy abuse victims. One was a priest who had been abused as a child. The anonymous 53-year-old said in part, quote, "What would I like to say to the bishops? That they listen to these people. I wanted someone to listen to me." In his keynote speech, Cardinal Tagle of Manila told the bishops the wounds they have inflicted on the faithful recall the wounds of Christ on the cross. And justice is just one element on the road to recovery.
Justice is necessary, but by itself, it does not heal the broken human heart.
Tagle also demanded bishops and superiors no longer turn a blind eye to the harm caused by clergy abuse and cover-ups. Jonathan Reyes, Assistant General Secretary for the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, joins us now from Rome. Jonathan, welcome to our broadcast.
Thank you, Lauren. It's nice to be here.
On Saturday, the Pope defrocked former Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, but nothing was said about how he rose to the top echelon of the church, despite persistent rumors about his sexual misconduct. Will the U.S. bishops address that to the faithful here in the U.S.?
Well, that's certainly a consideration that is being taken up by each of the dioceses where he served. And so there's an investigations going on in those dioceses, which should yield some information, and as soon as that's known, they'll share it.
The Vatican stopped the U.S. bishops from voting on measures last November. The bishops were prepared to do that. They were told to wait for this meeting. So the question is, will the U.S. bishops be bringing anything home from this meeting? Will there be any rules, anything concrete?
It's funny you should ask that. It's actually convenient because, as you know, the Pope issued what were 21 recommendations today that he put out that are very practical, frankly, that align with a lot that the U.S. bishops already do. And it'll be a great document both to see debated here and then to take back the product of that debate, whatever emerges from that. And that will absolutely inform all the things we're working on in the States. So it's good. It's good that these conversations will inform an extensive review of current proposals. And to move the agenda of the bishops of the United States forward, this can only help.
Survivors, we've talked to many of them, Jonathan Reyes, and they are demanding justice. How does the church, however, balance mercy and forgiveness? They're often extended to the abuser, and justice and accountability, it seems, are given less priority.
I think the proposals that are being considered in the U.S., and certainly the way that in the U.S. things have been working since 2002 with the Charter, not fulfilling all gaps, but certainly an excellent effort, and a lot of good has come of it, is to find exactly what you're saying, Lauren, which is this balance between justice on the one hand and forgiveness on the other. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. That doesn't make them easy prudentially. We know these are hard decisions. But it's clear that, particularly in the United States, with the zero tolerance policy that's been in place since 2002, there's a seriousness by the U.S. bishops on the justice side, as well as extensive outreach to survivors and a commitment to say, look, this can't happen again. And so everything they're doing is trying to balance both that justice side, that sense of healing, which is why there are coordinators for victims assistance in every diocese, and the prevention, the moving forward. So I think these three things can go together. That's been some of the rhetoric here. It's certainly been the conviction of the U.S. bishops for a long time.
Today we heard Archbishop Charles Cicluna, the Vatican's top sex abuse investigator, saying that bishops must take ownership of this crisis. What does that look like here in the U.S.?
Well, in the U.S., it looks like a lot of what I've seen, having had the privilege of working with the bishops over the last few months, and seeing it in November too, is there's a lot of bishops who will just say point blank, we own this. We own this. And what that means is an obligation to address it straight up. So you start with that listening, you admit wrongdoing. We're seeing publication of names, we're seeing activity by bishops, both individually and as a whole in the United States, where they're saying this is on us, in their own asking for forgiveness. So it looks like both those actions that are saying you're sorry, but then coupled with action that actually deals with the problem. And what's been working since 2002, what's been proposed and will, with the full expectation that the body of bishops will be considering these things in June, are precisely the kind of action that says This is on us. We take responsibility for working towards a solution to this. And the one thing I'd add to that, Lauren, which I think is so important, is, as Cardinal Donardo has said, and many bishops have said over and over again, to take responsibility means to invite lay professionalism and expertise into this. It doesn't mean we do it all. And there's been a lot of conversation in the U.S. and some even here about what that looks like. The way the Cardinal put it to me recently is he said, we need to be vulnerable to allow the lay experts who are better at things than we are and who can help us in this to step in, because the whole church as a community has got to address this together. So it's a combination of all those factors.
Does it include women?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I wouldn't work without that. And that's certainly on the top of the priority list.
Before you go, I just have one last question for you. Here in Washington, Cardinal Donald Wuerl, his resignation was accepted by the Pope, and we're waiting for a new leader. Do you have any news on that?
Not from my end. I'm one of those people who's waiting with bated breath to find out. But that doesn't fall in our bailiwick. So we'll continue to pray for that as we pray for everything we're doing here. Christ is in this, we trust him, but no particular news.
All right, Jonathan Reyes, Assistant General Secretary for the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. You know I had to ask. Thanks for coming on. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Lauren.
An Archbishop from Australia in Rome for the summit joins the calls for concrete action. He says there must be greater involvement from lay faithful.
There needs to be some system of inquiry, shall we say, locally. In my case, in Australia. It could be either provincial or it could be national. And it needs to be done by a team of people, which not all of whom are clerics, obviously. Again, you can't have Caesar judging Caesar.
Archbishop Mark Benedict Coleridge calls the abuse crisis, quote, a global emergency. And in Poland, a majority Catholic country, activists topple a statue of a priest amid recent allegations he sexually abused minors. Monsignor Henryk Jankowski, who died in 2010, was famous for fighting communism. Police arrested the three men who took down that monument. Coming up, changing how seminarians are trained, and my exclusive interview with the son of a Catholic priest. EWTN News Nightly asked top Vatican officials today whether they will consider two demands from survivors. One, that the Vatican release a list of abuser priests, and two, if they will crack down on bishops who are covering up abuse.
We're talking about priests who have been condemned, and I think that should happen already in the diocese. That people should have access to that information. And we also had a session with a number of victims yesterday, and their demands were very explicit, and we cannot ignore that voice.
That was News Nightly executive producer Susanna Pinto, who asked that question during a Vatican press briefing this afternoon, attended by dozens of journalists from around the world. As church leaders gather in Rome to address all of the issues around clergy sex abuse, 5 Catholic women, all seminary professors, sent recommendations to U.S. bishops last month. They include immediate actions to train and protect seminarians when it comes to sexual abuse or harassment. Joining me now by Skype is one of the co-authors of those recommendations, Dr. Susan Selner Wright, the Archbishop Charles Chaput, Chair of Philosophy at St. John Vianney Theological Seminary in Denver. Dr. Selner Wright, welcome to our broadcast.
Thank you very much.
Many in our audience might not know that women teach in seminaries, so your viewpoint is unique to this abuse crisis. How important is it to have women influence priestly formation?
Well, it's vital, and the church itself has recognized that. I've been teaching here at St. John Vianney since 2001, so it's not like it's a new phenomenon. But it is an important one, and I think it's one of the ways in which the church in the U.S. can help the church around the world to see the importance of all the people of God and the different states of life coming together to form the priests who then in turn serve the body of Christ.
On your list of recommendations that the 5 of you sent in, the first is an immediate internal review of all seminaries. Now, an investigation happened already in 2005. So what are you proposing that's different?
Well, a visitation did occur in 2005, and a lot of good came out of that, and we definitely recognize that. And the whole heightening of awareness around these issues since the Dallas Charter in 2002 also, it cannot be underplayed. It's not like we haven't made any progress. We certainly have. But part of what we now know much more vividly, thanks to former Cardinal McCarrick, is that in addition to the protection of minors, we need to be very deliberate about our protection of seminarians and about making sure that we're forming seminarians in such a way that they're more apt to embrace celibate chastity as the life-giving real source of their happiness, really, in their priestly ministry, in a more deliberate way.
You say that obedience and docility are important qualities in seminarian, yet too much emphasis contributes to clericalism. So how can that balance be struck?
Well, it's just like all other balances, that we have to pay attention to people in the moment where they are. And you know, it's very interesting to spend time with seminarians because they're so filled with this desire to offer their lives, and they want to be obedient to God, and they want to learn the habits of being with others in a way that fosters that obedience to God. But they're also learning to become spiritual fathers, and spiritual fathers have to know how to lead with authority. They need to know how to speak to others in authority in a way that is calm and polite, but also sometimes quite firm. And so there needs to be a balance of that everywhere for everyone in the church, but most particularly for those who are preparing to be priests.
Dr. Susan Selner Wright, thank you for joining us, for sharing your insights as Catholic women who teach in seminaries. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Up next, one man's quest to get the Vatican to recognize children of Catholic priests. Earlier this week, the Vatican confirmed to the New York Times that guidelines exist for priests who break their vow of celibacy and have children. In that article, Vincent Doyle spoke about his journey. At age 28, he found out his father was a Catholic priest, and now Doyle, who is Irish, wants to raise awareness about the issue of children fathered by clergy and the culture of secrecy in the church. And joining us from Rome is Vincent Doyle. Vincent, thank you so much for being on this broadcast. Can you tell us your story? Tell us what happened to you.
Thank you for having me. I found out that I am the son of a Catholic priest, an Irish Catholic priest, in 2011. Father JJ, who actually ministered in the US for some time until 1983 when I was born. He died in 1995, but he stood as my godfather because he wanted to have a part in my life. And I remember him fondly. He was a good man, he was a good priest, and there just wasn't the language to be able to say those type of things back then. But thank God, and thank God to the archbishops, there is now.
You talked to the New York Times, and it forced the Vatican earlier this week to address the secret guidelines of how priests who father children are supposed to act. Can you tell us about that? What was that like for you?
It's great to be acknowledged, thank God. The problem, children of priests, the problem that they experience is characterized by non-acknowledgement. So for the Holy See to not acknowledge this issue compounds the original problem. So thank God, that they did acknowledge, they confirmed this. As early as yesterday, I followed up, and I can tell you that the Congregation for Clergy, Monsignor Ripa, we had a very courteous conversation. He confirmed to me the document, though it's internal, it is a template document. So when bishops visit individually, collectively at the ad limina visits, they are shown this document and encouraged to create a similar document back home. These documents are in existence across the world. The bishops are aware of the situation. So if your viewers are watching, if they're affected by this, please contact your local safeguarding officer, because the bishops do know how to respond. So it was an amazing thing to see the Holy See say the word children of priests.
I can imagine. What do you want for children of priests who have not been recognized to hear?
That they're cared for, that their pain is real, that emotional pain, neglect, psychological harm, it's not right. Priests should not be engaged in this type of behavior. And that the Holy Father has confirmed to me in person when I met him, and the Vatican do care, and that they do want to respond to this properly. Now, in saying that, make no mistake, to neglect a child, this is clerical abuse. So if you engage in any harmful behavior, conditional parenting, this is clerical abuse and requires a response. There's been a lot done, but there's an awful lot more to do. And in the US, you have a very serious problem. The United States are in the top 1% of 175 countries accessing help on copinginternational.com. So far, we've had over in excess of 50,000 users, and we're quite confident to say that there are in excess of 10,000 children on a global level. There's been a lot done, and thank God for that, but there's an extensive amount of work still to be done. And we can't just sit back and wait for that to happen. We have to push for it to happen.
Vincent Doyle, can you tell me what the Pope said to you? When did you have this meeting, and what happened?
It was a brief meeting. I met Pope Francis on the 19th anniversary of my father's death in 2014, June 4th. After an audience, I spoke to him. I told him that I am the son of a Catholic priest. He listened to me. He put his arm around me. I had a translator with me who went through the program I designed for free mental health care for children of priests. There's 8 years of research going into this. He listened attentively. He took my letter and he placed it to his heart, and he said to me, see, I will read. We got a response back from the Irish Catholic bishops within 2 weeks. The entire project was approved, free mental health care was provided, mediation services and pastoral care, and the bishops of Ireland have been leading the way. They're pioneers of safeguarding. The Pope wrote to me then some months later and gave a blessing upon this ministry for the charitable efforts that motivate our initiative. So that was heartening to see. A lot done, again, thank God, but I would hope and pray that by the end of this summit, Pope Francis will say the word children of priests. There's a crossover between sexual abuse of minors and children of priests via epebophilia, which is the sexual preference for adolescents. And the Pennsylvania report confirmed this, whereupon some victims did become pregnant as a result. And that really increases the difficulty. So it's not a separate issue. People tend to compartmentalize, and that's a mistake. It's harmful. So this issue needs to be looked at in light of sexual abuse of minors and vulnerable adults.
Vincent Doyle, a son of a priest, you have worked tirelessly to get the Vatican support, and it sounds like you had the support of the Irish bishops, and I've heard from other people that Irish bishops have also been supportive to them when they are talking about clergy sex abuse. Thank you so much for sharing your story with our audience. Again, the name of the website is?
copinginternational.com.
Thank you so much. Vincent Doyle, son of a priest.
Thank you, Lauren.
And that does it for us. We're wrapping up the Vatican Summit, Day 1. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. Good night, and God bless you.